The OAK Tree of Life, specifically Module 1 by Joe Bandel, presents a provocative challenge to the way we usually experience time by arguing that the past and future are essentially non-existent constructs. This module, titled Presence and the Living Now, serves as an entry-level introduction to what Bandel calls the living current, and it forces us to confront an uncomfortable reality. Most of our mental energy is spent in places that don't actually exist. When we examine the text, we find this radical assertion that power, joy, and the capacity for change are only accessible in the present moment, which is the only time life can actually be lived or felt. It strikes me as a significant departure from the typical self-help approach that often focuses on long-term goal setting or processing past trauma as the primary levers for improvement. Instead, Bandel is saying the leverage is right here, and if you aren't here, you're effectively powerless.
It is a very grounded form of mysticism if you look at it closely. Bandel, who is based in Minnesota and has spent years translating early 20th century German weird fiction and occult texts, brings a unique philosophical flavor to this. In Module 1, he isn't just giving us a mindfulness exercise, he's outlining an ontological position. He describes the past as already gone and the future as not yet arrived. To him, replaying old conversations or worrying about what might happen is a literal drain on our current reality. He uses the phrase living current to describe this flow of energy that we often ignore. According to Bandel's framework, which he elaborates on in his broader work like the OAK matrix, humans have this unique ability to miss their own lives by being somewhere else mentally. The core of his argument is that the present is the only ground from which everything real grows.
But isn't there a tension there? If the future doesn't exist, how do we account for the very real consequences of our planning or our anxieties? It seems almost dismissive of the human capacity for foresight, which is arguably what allowed us to survive as a species. Bandel talks about how trying to live someone else's life or waiting for permission drains energy, but he also mentions that no one else has ever lived the exact life you are living. He calls this uniqueness the ground from which everything real grows. I wonder if he's suggesting that by focusing on the now, we aren't ignoring the future, but rather we are finally standing on the only platform where we can actually build it.
That is exactly the nuance he's driving at. He isn't saying don't plan, he's saying don't live in the plan. There's a section in the module called Your Unique Life, where he emphasizes that your history, temperament, and limits are yours alone and are not problems to be fixed. This is a crucial point because it shifts the focus from an idealized version of ourselves, which usually exists in that non-existent future, to the actual person standing in the room. He argues that trying to live up to others' expectations is a form of waiting for permission that prevents you from meeting your actual life. It's about radical acceptance of the present conditions as the starting point. You can't change a life you aren't currently inhabiting.
That leads into his third point about life being short and sacred. He uses the word sacred in a way that feels very practical, almost secularly spiritual. He lists 3 foundations for a sacred life: caring for the body, building quiet confidence through small efforts, and listening to an inner sense of truth. It's interesting that he places caring for the body as the first foundation. It feels like he's grounding this presence in biology. If the body is the vessel for the living current, then ignoring its health is essentially a form of disrespect toward life itself. How does he bridge the gap between this biological care and the internal sense of truth he mentions?
He bridges it through the concept of real effort. Bandel is very clear that happiness is grown, not found. It doesn't arrive as a gift from external circumstances or possessions. In his view, happiness is the byproduct of seeing the results of your own effort, no matter how small. This is where his background in what he calls organic Gnosticism comes through. It's a philosophy of doing. He suggests that when results are missing, we shouldn't see it as a personal failure, but as information. Maybe more effort is needed, or maybe a different direction. By treating lack of success as data rather than a verdict on our soul, we stay in the present moment. We don't get lost in the shame of the past or the fear of a failing future.
I find his perspective on celebration particularly challenging. He says celebration doesn't mean pretending everything is pleasant. That feels counterintuitive. Usually we think of celebration as a response to something good happening, but Bandel defines it as meeting whatever is actually happening, difficulty, success, struggle, with an open willingness to be present for it. He claims that if we refuse the difficult parts, we also dull our capacity for joy. That's a strong psychological claim. It suggests that our emotional range is a single dial. If you turn down the volume on pain by being absent, you're also turning down the volume on happiness.
It's a very stoic idea, but with more vitality. When he says celebration means saying yes to what is happening, he's talking about a basic level of existential consent. If you're in a difficult situation and you're mentally fighting against the fact that it's happening, you're divided. Half of you is in the situation and the other half is in a fantasy world where the situation isn't happening. Bandel's OAK tree of life philosophy suggests that this division is where we lose our power. By meeting the difficulty with presence, you become whole again. That wholeness is what he considers a sacred way of living. It's the restoration of joy through the simple act of noticing.
The idea that not only is the present the only place of power, but that it's also where our unique life actually resides is quite profound. Most people spend their lives waiting for their real life to begin once they've fixed certain flaws or reached certain milestones. Bandel is essentially saying the flaws and the current milestones are the life. There's no separate real life waiting behind a curtain. He mentions that treating life as an endless problem to be solved later is a quiet form of disrespect. That phrase, quiet form of disrespect, sticks with me. It implies that being distracted is a moral failing of sorts, or at least a failure of stewardship over our own existence.
And he backs that up with his take on confidence. He talks about building quiet confidence through small, real efforts, rather than waiting for external approval. This is central to his Module 1 teaching. If you're always looking for someone else to tell you you're doing a good job, you're living in their reality, not yours. You're trying to mirror a perception of yourself that exists in someone else's mind, another non-existent place. By focusing on the effort itself and the small results you can see with your own eyes, you ground your confidence in something verifiable. It becomes an internal feedback loop rather than an external one.
This whole module seems designed to strip away the abstractions we use to hide from ourselves, whether it's the abstraction of the future, the abstraction of external approval, or the abstraction of what a good life should look like. It's a very stripped down, almost minimalist approach to existence. But I wonder, is there a risk of becoming too self-centered here? If the focus is entirely on my presence, my body, and my inner truth, where do other people and collective responsibility fit into the OAK tree of life?
In the broader context of Bandel's work, including his focus on duality as a loving embrace, he sees the individual as a node in a larger field. But his point in Module 1 is that you're a useless node if you're not actually present. You can't have a real relationship with another person if you're replaying a conversation with them from 3 years ago in your head while they're talking to you. True connection requires two people who are both in the now. So the self-focus is actually a prerequisite for genuine altruism and connection. You have to be here to be there for someone else. He's arguing that the most radical thing you can do for the world is to stop leaking your energy into the past and future.
It's also worth noting how he handles failure. He says when results are missing, it's just useful information. That seems like a direct attack on the ego. The ego wants a result to be a reflection of its worth. Bandel is suggesting we treat our efforts like an experiment in a lab. If the chemical reaction doesn't happen, the scientist doesn't usually go home and question their right to exist. They look at the variables. It's a very technical way to look at self-growth, which might be why he calls these OAK matrix concepts a form of self-empowerment that integrates with a general field theory. He's trying to find the mechanics of how a human being actually functions when they're operating at peak efficiency.
That technical aspect is likely why he uses terms like module and matrix. He's looking for the underlying structure of experience. In Module 1, the structure is time and presence. He challenges the listener to listen for their own inner sense of what is true and act from that rather than second-guessing. That's the part that requires courage. Second-guessing is a way to stay safe in the realm of imagination. Acting from inner truth requires you to step into the physical world where there are real consequences. It's the difference between thinking about jumping into a pool and actually feeling the water hit your skin. The second one is the only one that actually changes your state.
He ends the module by talking about wholeness. He says when we meet both ease and difficulty with a basic yes, life begins to feel more whole. It's a powerful concluding thought because it suggests that the feeling of being broken or incomplete that so many people struggle with might just be a symptom of being scattered across time. If you gather all those pieces, the parts of you stuck in regret and the parts stuck in anxiety, and bring them into the current moment, the feeling of lack disappears because you are finally all there. It's a simple idea, but as he notes, it takes real effort to practice it.
It's a practice of attention. Bandel's work reminds us that attention is our most valuable currency. Where we place it determines the quality of our reality. If we spend it on the non-existent, we end up feeling empty. If we invest it in the present, even in the difficult parts, we find a sense of sacredness and power that can't be taken away by external changes. This module is really an invitation to stop skipping over the only part of life that's actually happening. It's a call to inhabit your own skin and your own time with a sense of authority.
The OAK Tree of Life offers a framework for reclaiming the power that we often unknowingly give away to our memories and our fears. By focusing on the physical reality of the body, the immediate feedback of small efforts, and the radical acceptance of the now, Bandel suggests we can move from a life of distraction to a life of presence. It's a demanding philosophy because it leaves no room for excuses, but it's also incredibly liberating because it means that everything we need to start living a sacred life is already here. If you found this discussion on presence and the living current useful, share it with someone who might need a reminder to return to the only time that actually exists.